the question, so you'll all raise my hand so David knows what's going on. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Trimble. I'm the Executive Director of the Gaslamp Quarter Association, and it's my great pleasure to host this mayoral debate. I'd like to introduce our candidates, Council President Pro Tem representing District 1, Barbara Bry.
And please call me Barbara.
Barbara, thank you for joining us. And our Assembly Member representing the 78th District, Mr. Todd Gloria.
Todd is also perfect.
This debate would not have been possible without the help and support of the Gaslamp Quarter Association Board of Directors. And I'd also like to recognize our new chairperson, the GM of the Hilton Gaslamp Quarter and Solimar, Dania Duke.
Okay.
All questions were collected in advance of today's debate from board members and the membership. So no questions will be taken from the audience today. If you do have questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat and we'll get them to the candidates and they can answer them at a later date. All your lines are unmuted. So I would like to take this opportunity now to introduce our moderator who covers politics for the Union Tribune, Mr. David Garrett. David?
Hey,
Thank you.
glad to do it. Excited to hear the candidates express their opinions.
Excellent. So should we get going and
Yes,
do some introductions?
We're going to start with 2-minute introductions by the two candidates, and Barbara Bry is going to go first.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Michael, and the Gaslamp Quarter Association, and I appreciate the tour that you took me on a few Friday nights ago. It was good to see downtown becoming vibrant again. After a career in business and the nonprofit world, I ran for city council in 2016 because I was frustrated that the street in front of my office was being torn up yet again to have the same work done. When I got to City Hall, I found a culture of no accountability and no transparency, a culture that had taken decades to evolve. And it was also a place where major decisions are made behind closed doors. I stood up to this immediately. I am not afraid to challenge the status quo. I was the first elected official to oppose the Soccer City land grab and to support SDSU West. I'm proud of holding together a fragile council coalition to get the SDSU West transaction completed, and I was thrilled to attend the groundbreaking in August. This is one of the most transformative projects in our region in decades, and it demonstrates that with the right leadership, San Diego can do big things. I demanded an independent audit of the water department when customers told me they were being overbilled and weren't being taken seriously. We'd be here till midnight if I detailed all that we found out. And I was the first elected official to demand answers about the disastrous 101 Ash Street purchase, a purchase led by my opponent when he was on the city council. It's a glaring example of everything that is wrong at City Hall. My priorities as mayor are to lead an inclusive economic recovery, to protect our neighborhoods, to reinvent public safety, and to address homelessness with a seamless system that focuses on the root causes of mental health and substance abuse. I've detailed this and more in my Roadmap to Recovery, which we released in June. I've spent my life standing up for others, challenging the status quo and getting things done. My life has been about coming up with solutions, not making empty promises. I will bring my years of experience in business, the nonprofit sector, and government to leading our city.
Thank you, Barbara. Todd, you ready to go?
Thank you, David. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Gaslamp Quarter Association, and to all of the folks who've tuned in. I'm sure you need another Zoom in your life like you need a hole in the head, but you're here because you care deeply about the Gaslamp Quarter and about our city and in the direction that we need to go in. My name is Todd Gloria. I have had the honor of representing Gaslamp Quarter as a city council member and as a state legislator. I value and treasure my relationship with the association and the good work that we've been able to do together. And I'm running for mayor because as a third generation San Diegan, I know where our city has been. As the son of a hotel maid and a gardener, I know how difficult it is for working people to make ends meet in a town as expensive as San Diego. And probably most importantly, I have a vision for where I'd like to take our city. Broadly speaking, we face many challenges as a community, but overwhelmingly, what I observe is that we are too often a big city that operates like a small town. You have seen this through our inability to regulate short-term vacation rentals, allowing scooters to operate for years in our community without regulation. The list goes on and on. These are issues that most other cities have successfully resolved, and yet we never seem to get around to them. Meanwhile, we have a homelessness crisis in our city. We are the 8th largest city in the United States, but we have the 5th largest homeless population in the United States. We're spending more than we ever have on this particular problem, but few people will believe the news coming out of City Hall that it's getting better. Most of us believe that it is getting worse. We are a world-class city without a world-class transportation system, as evidenced by the fact that we have a trolley and an airport that are next to one another, and yet they don't connect. And probably most importantly and pressing is our housing affordability crisis, a situation where working and middle-class people don't see a future for themselves in San Diego because they can't afford the rent. They don't foresee being able to buy a home and raising a family and building wealth. I believe that we have to tackle all of these issues. And as your next mayor, that would be my priority. I want to take my experiences as your city council member, as a council president, interim mayor, and state legislator, and put that experience to work for San Diego to resolve these issues that other cities have successfully resolved and tackle the big issues that need a champion. That's what I'll do as your mayor. And thank you all for the opportunity to be here today.
Thanks, Todd. Great stuff. We're going to jump into the questions. Todd, you'll start. This is question number 1. Basically, please describe how you regard the Gaslamp Quarter as a place to do business and explain how you will strengthen and support the local economy.
Well, what I know is what you all have taught me over many years. I mean, Gaslamp Quarter is a very special place. It's the heart of San Diego. It is a vibrant, internationally known entertainment and hospitality district. But of course, that is complicated by the coronavirus and the pandemic and the resulting recession. Obviously, with limited travel and various restrictions, that is hard hitting the Gaslamp. But the Gaslamp is a difficult place to run a business as it is. Rents are expensive. Business is seasonal. And the balance of businesses or lack thereof is a concern. I can recall conversations with retail shops in the area that understand that this is an area where people go to eat and to drink, but they want to see it be a place that is also a vibrant place for retail, a place that also serves the broader community. David, you asked, what can we do about it? Well, certainly the city should be a partner in making sure that the businesses that are there can continue to thrive. And I recognize that your interactions with the Development Services Department probably are nothing that you would like to do on a repetitive basis. We have to become more customer service oriented. We need to be able to say yes more than we say no, recognizing that when we say no, that may be the end of your business. I think that we have to do what we can to promote tourism and make sure that customers come back, because we know when they come to the convention center and to hotels, they're coming to your restaurants and your businesses. Obviously, the mayor has an ability to help lead on that matter. And then going forward, we have to find innovative ways to invite more customers to your business district. And I'm thinking about the closure of Fifth Avenue on a permanent basis to make it a pedestrian experience, a safe experience. That is, again, something that the city should be a partner with the Gaslamp Quarter District on. And that's something that I would expect to do as your mayor.
Barbara?
Thank you. Well, the Gaslamp Quarter resurgence has been a point of pride for San Diego, and we are indebted to the Gaslamp Quarter Association, the Downtown San Diego Partnership, and other leaders who made it possible. What you all need are customers, tourists, people who live downtown, and people who work downtown. Your businesses need customers. And I'm very excited that downtown is on the verge of becoming a major center for tech and biotech, which is going to bring more people downtown who are going to frequent the Gaslamp Quarter. This is why my background, particularly as a tech entrepreneur and coming out of this world, is so important at this moment in time. Horton Plaza is being revitalized for both tech and biotech. The Manchester complex is now in escrow to a new real estate investment trust called IQHQ, which plans to create a biotech center downtown. This is transformational. During the pandemic, tech and biotech continued working. Biotech in particular needs a physical space. They have research labs that their work cannot be done remotely. And this resurgence of downtown, creating a job center downtown of good paying jobs and good service sector jobs around them, is going to really create a lot of excitement and opportunity for the Gaslamp. As mayor, this is my background. I intend to market San Diego to the world to get more tech and biotech investment into our city, which will lead to a stronger economy, and that will benefit you. And yes, there is too much red tape at City Hall. One of my priorities is to revitalize, reorientate development services into a customer-focused organization.
Great. Okay, we go on to question 2, or does someone want to do a rebuttal on question 1? Okay. Question 2, we'll start with you, Barbara. If you become mayor, how will you solve the homeless problem in the downtown area? And what is your plan for having the convention center host conventions versus serving as a homeless shelter?
Yeah, so actually, during the pandemic, it has been very successful to use the convention center as a large homeless shelter to get the city and the county working more collaboratively, to be able to work with individuals to get them the specific help they need, whether it's to go into a substance abuse or mental health program, transitional housing, or reunite them with their families. As I've talked to in the hotel industry, it's not expected that the convention business or corporate meeting business is going to come back until the spring of next year. So I am looking at whether we should continue operating the convention center as a homeless shelter through the end of the year. We have federal money to pay for this while we close escrow on the hotel rooms that the city is planning to buy, while we figure out how we can reopen the bridge shelter safely and how we can get people into programs they may need regarding substance abuse and mental health. I think it's important to know that while my opponent was on the city council, when he was sworn in for a second term, he promised to end chronic homelessness downtown. And according to the Downtown Partnership in December 2012, I'm reading their numbers, there were 593 unsheltered individuals downtown. 4 years later, that number had grown to 1,415. That number is less today, but in a sense, it's worse today because what we're seeing on the street right now are the chronic homeless, people who have clear mental health and substance abuse issues, who need help, and it is inhumane to let them stay on the street. When I walked around the Gaslamp at night, that was when and we saw several homeless individuals, that's when social workers should have been out talking to people.
Todd, you ready to go?
More than ready, David. Thank you. You hear this data coming from City Hall that somehow the numbers are lower. Maybe show of hands, how many of you all think that this problem is getting better, that there are fewer homeless people on the streets? Yeah, exactly right. And so if it takes a pandemic to get the numbers to come down because we have to convert our convention center into a homeless shelter, let's not declare this success. What this is temporary. And the fact of the matter is the current leadership at City Hall, which my opponent is a part of, is intending to close the convention center in a matter of weeks before they close escrow on these new hotel properties, essentially saying that the 1,300 people that are in that shelter ought to be shuffled out onto Harbor Drive and back into the Gaslamp Quarter. That is not an effective strategy. Working with Senator Atkins, we have been able to provide the city with nearly over $37 million to acquire those properties. Those two hotels will be able to house over 400 homeless people, but there's still a delta, right, of the number of people who are in the convention center versus the number of beds that we have to transition them. The convention center, sadly, is not intended to reopen for its normal business anytime soon. And closing it before then, I think, sends a negative message at a time when Barbara's correct. We have done the right thing by bringing people together. It shouldn't have taken a global pandemic to get this kind of leadership. But sadly, that's the level of prioritization that this current administration has given to this particular issue. All of you know that this was never a priority of Mayor Faulconer prior to him becoming mayor, and it shows, right? I have a different approach. Throughout my public career, I have made homelessness a priority. I've worked on this diligently. And if we have a homelessness crisis, well, maybe it's time we put a homelessness advocate in the mayor's office. I will demand transparency and accountability from those who contract with the city. As I mentioned before, we're spending more than we ever have on this problem, and yet it does not seem to be getting better. I think that's largely because we're not spending money on proven national best practices. Instead, we're squandering it on bankrupted indoor skydiving facilities as favors to political political contributors that is now the subject of federal investigation. That is how we're spending our money currently. I believe that those who are receiving the funds should show that they're getting people off the streets and keeping them off the streets. If they can do that, they should get more money. If they can't, they should get no money. We must partner with the County of San Diego, and I'm proud to have the endorsement of County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, because he believes that I'm the candidate he can work with to reset the city-county relationship and get people off the streets. We must work in every community because our homelessness numbers, 2/3 are in the city of San Diego, but 1/3 are in the other cities. And we must coordinate with National City, Chula Vista, El Cajon, and the other cities to make sure that what we're doing is coordinated. And lastly, we have to build more housing, because sadly, many of those who are homeless are, in addition to having mental illness and substance abuse issues, they are also often low-wage workers who can't find a place to live in San Diego. I will be a mayor that champions the construction of housing that is affordable to people so that we get more people off the streets.
I would like a moment to rebut. I just said I wanted to keep the convention center open through the end of the year. I never said I wanted to close it right away. I don't know what Mayor Faulkner is planning to do. I have no control over him, but I said I would like to keep it open through the end of the year, and then we will see what goes on.
As chair of the budget committee, I would encourage you to do that, and maybe we can partner on doing so.
Great, let's move on to question 3. It's something that Todd referred to tangentially earlier, the idea, it's a proposal to close Fifth Avenue to pedestrian, make it close it to vehicle traffic to make it pedestrian friendly. Anyway, and that's happening now, but the question is what's going to happen after the pandemic goes away, abates. So you both have stated that you support that idea, but if you take office, will you support closing Fifth Avenue immediately prior to when redevelopment can begin? And how will you make this project a reality? This is you, Todd.
Yes, okay, just making sure. So first up, I think that this could be transformative for the Gaslamp Quarter. I tried to lead on this when I was on the city council, and we were able to take a small iterative step toward this when we created the no parking along Fifth Avenue on weekend nights in order to increase safety and provide flexibility for mobility options in the community. I think people's worst fears for that step have not proven true and has created the support for taking this next step. And while I'm very supportive of the broader world-class vision that has been proposed for this avenue, I think that we should strike while the iron's hot and take the step similar to what we did in the Plaza de Panama in Balboa Park, where you saw through mayoral leadership that you could convert that space into a pedestrianized zone. For anyone who has concerns, I would point out that every time we have done this, it has been a home run for San Diego. The Plaza de Panama, the Waterfront Park, Date Street in Little Italy, the North Embarcadero Phase 1 visionary plan, all of these conversions of places that were previously dedicated to cars and giving them back to people have been transformative for those parts of our city. And I think, and I know the same could be true for the Gaslamp Quarter. I am concerned because of the high price tag associated with the transformative world-class project that this ability to do this is many years away, particularly given the recession. So what we should do is create an opportunity to do this, to authorize the closure, and we can work with the community to understand, is that temporary bollards on weekends and weekend nights, or is that a permanent full closure? But the point I'm trying to make is that I think we should do this sooner rather than later, so that the community of the Gaslamp Quarter, that is undeniably going to have to be crawling out of the hole that has been dug by this recession, can be assisted. The people can know they can come to the Gaslamp Quarter and maintain social distance, that they can be safe, and they can go there and help support those local businesses that are on Fifth Avenue. So the answer is yes. Working with our streets division, we can get that done, and we should do it sooner rather than later.
Barbara?
Thank you. This is an issue on which my opponent and I agree. It was wonderful to spend a recent Friday evening with you, Michael, and walking through the Gaslamp, seeing people dining outdoors. And I've been in neighborhoods all over the city where this is happening, in my council district on Avenida de la Playa, where one block has been closed. It's a festive atmosphere, and San Diegans and tourists are enjoying being able to enjoy our city. And I believe that, as mayor, I will keep the Fifth Avenue a pedestrian-friendly promenade until the formal process of building a permanent promenade becomes available. And I liked your idea of installing bollards, maybe just on the weekends, as a way of sort of differentiating the spaces. What's been frustrating to me as a council member and as a resident of San Diego is to see the hurdles that often our city bureaucracy puts up. The restaurant owners and the residents of La Jolla Shores, for example, were adamant about wanting to close this one block of Avenida de la Playa. And the hurdles they went through with different parts of the city bureaucracy telling them they had to do this, they had to do that. There was often a conflict, was horrible. Finally, the mayor stepped in a little bit late and did it by executive decree. But it should never have come to that. As mayor, when we have issues like this, I'm going to get everybody around the table. We're going to iron out the differences. We're going to have a plan. We're going to hold people accountable with a timeline. This is what I've done over and over again in my life as an executive in the business world and in the nonprofit world. Sorely, this type of accountability is lacking today at City Hall.
Can I move on to the next question, Todd, or you want to rebut that? No. Okay, great. Next question. Barbara, we'll start with this one. Measure C in 2018 would have expanded the convention center and funded some other initiatives, but it failed to get 2/3 approval. But now there's court cases and lawsuits arguing that maybe it only needs a simple majority. So the question would be, what should be done relating to that measure, if anything, and how would you work to get the convention center expanded? And Barbara goes first here.
Okay, thank you. So Measure C is another issue on which my opponent and I agree. We both voted for Measure C, and I'm disappointed that it did not reach the 2/3 threshold. So there is a legal issue here. The San Francisco measure, which is the measure that has gone up to the Supreme Court, told voters that it only required 50% plus one. Our measure, in contrast, told voters that it required 2/3. And it's unclear from our city charter. Our city charter apparently requires a 2/3 vote if you're going to issue bonds. And this measure was designed to allow the TOT to be used as collateral security to be able to issue bonds to finance the construction of the convention center. So right now I'm looking for some legal analysis. I want to make sure the city's on strong legal ground, however we proceed. This isn't something I want to see us tied up in the courts. But what we now know going forward is that there can be citizens initiatives, not coming from the council, that can propose a tax increase that can, go forward to the voters and become the law with 50% plus one. So that may open up opportunities going forward, but I want to make sure this time around the city doesn't do anything that's going to put it in legal jeopardy.
Todd?
Well, it is true that both of us supported Prop C, but only one of us campaigned for it. And when you look at how achingly close we came to the 2/3 threshold, 65% plus of San Diegans voted to support expanding the convention center, investing more in our road repair and homelessness. You recognize why we needed every hand on deck to try and pass this measure. Here we are in the situation now where it becomes increasingly clear that the courts are saying that this measure may have passed on its own. And of course, this is going to be subject to litigation and uncertainty for the foreseeable future. Obviously, the next opportunity to put something on the ballot, whether by voters or by the city council, is in 2022. I suspect that we can get some certainty on the outcome of Measure C before then, and the city should pursue that. Going back to the previous question about the homeless residing at the convention center, imagine what more we could do for those residents if we had the permanent funding source for homelessness that's envisioned in Measure C. So I think there's stuff that's worth their fighting for. Certainly, any of you who've driven on any of our roads recognize that we could use more money to repair our streets and fill potholes. So I think there's a lot that's there. If it ends up not working out in our favor, in terms of those of us who are passionate about expanding our convention center, recognizing it for the economic engine that it is for San Diego, then citizens could band again, as they did with Measure C, and give it another try. Ultimately, we must expand our convention center. You all know personally how important it is. You know the difference between when there's a convention in town and when there is one not in town. And that is what we're missing out on if we do not remain competitive. I recognize it's difficult to envision a world where we're inviting thousands of people into a large convention hall at this present time. But of course, we know the situation is temporary. We will get through COVID-19. And if we can come out of it with a renewed and restored convention center, with an expanded convention center that allows us to compete against folks like Anaheim, San Francisco, Las Vegas, we will be better off as a community. And so I will continue to push, as I have always pushed, to expand the convention center. My hope is we can do it with Measure C. If we may not, we'll have to revisit our options in 2022.
Can I go to the next question, or Barbara, did you want to rebut that, or we're good to go?
I'm good.
All right, we're good to go to the next question. We'll start with you, Todd. It's kind of a long one. It's about restaurants closing at night. But basically, under the current county public health order, restaurants must stop serving meals at 10 p.m. Many restaurants in the Gaslamp survive on the revenue generated between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Given that restaurants have already implemented extensive safety measures and social distancing protocols, and given that there is no evidence that a person is more likely to contract COVID-19 at 11 p.m. than, say, at 9 p.m., would you support removing curfew or at least extending the hours of operations for restaurants in the Gaslamp or anywhere else?
I think this is the kind of modifications that we should be considering. I recognize there are those at the County Board of Supervisors who are asking for, I think, rather dramatic changes to our Tier 2 status, which I don't know is responsible, supported by science or supported by public health professionals. David, as you mentioned in the question, I think there is evidence to support that what our restaurants are doing is defensible, and that time is something that could be looked at. When I've had an opportunity to visit with restaurants, both in the Gaslamp Quarter and elsewhere, this is an issue that has been raised to me. And I think that this is really a matter of making sure that the businesses that would be given this opportunity handle it responsibly. I think that when we were advocating early in the pandemic for takeaway cocktails, there was a question about whether or not businesses would be able to handle this successfully and safely. And I think the fact of the matter is they've proven that they've been able to do that. I think a similar situation here, where we could have this relatively modest modification to allow more businesses to stay in business, continue to hire and employ San Diegans. I think that that's preferable to the kind of, again, wholesale reopening that is not supported by science or public health professionals. And I think that going forward, that's going to be really important. As we learn more about the virus, as we understand how it spreads and how we can prevent its spread, I think that should be what guides our modifications to the public health order. And this is the kind of partnership that I would hope to have with you all as mayor, finding, again, these modest adjustments that are supported by data and science in order to move forward. Right now, I know many of you are just holding on by your fingertips, and you need to have a mayor that understands that and is willing to work to help you get through it. I hope to be that mayor for you.
Barbara?
Well, I'll keep it very simple. You all are operating safely outdoors with limited capacity indoors. You're doing it safely. Adding another hour to your operation makes a lot of sense, and I will work with you and with our public health officials and with the police to allow an additional hour. But hopefully by the time I'm mayor, we're even further through the pandemic, and we will be back at a more normal life. It makes economic sense if you're going to employ people you're going to pay them, they're going to pay taxes, you're going to generate more revenue, sales tax revenue for the city, and you're already doing it safely. Giving you an extra hour is only a win-win for all of us.
Great. We're ready for the next question. This is for you to start, Barbara. The cancellation of special events has negatively impacted the Gaslamp Quarter and many of its employees. There currently is no guidance as to when events will be allowed to begin again. How would you, as mayor, help bring special events back to San Diego?
So first of all, I am very frustrated that there has been no guidance about how we can bring special events back. And I'm actually setting up a series of meetings with people who specialize in doing these events so we can start developing guidelines on how this can be done safely. When I walked through the Gaslamp with Michael and others, they told me that so far they've been prohibited from starting up an artisans market. And that seems ridiculous to me. This is an outdoor market. You can go inside to Nordstrom at UTC. You can go inside to Urban Outfitters in the Gaslamp. Why can't you have an outdoor artisans market? And we have farmers markets operating safely all over the city. So this is another example of bureaucratic ineptitude and ridiculousness. And these are the kinds of things I want to fix as mayor. It's why I'm running for mayor. I probably could have had a second term on the city council very easily. But I decided that I wanted to step up and use my executive experience to make significant change at City Hall, to truly develop a culture that is accountable and transparent and responsive to the needs of our businesses and our residents.
Todd?
Yes, well, so this is an important question. Not waiting to become mayor to work on this matter. I've met with a number of folks who are advocating in this space, longtime associates like Kevin Hellman and Sandy Cottrell from Art Walk and others who have really, I think, laid out a thoughtful approach to how they can operate special events in a way that is safe. We trust these folks under normal times to provide public security in a time of some public safety risk. We allow them to manage alcoholic beverage gardens, right? We know that they have the ability to manage these kinds of situations, and I believe in their ability to do it now during COVID. Of course, there'll have to be modifications, and so the advocacy I'm trying to do in Sacramento with the governor to give us the kind of guidelines that are necessary, hopefully will be instructive for how we can go back to doing even limited and smaller events, knowing that even those limited and smaller events is the difference between certain businesses living and others going out of business, a certain number of people being employed or certain people remaining unemployed. I think importantly, though, it can't be centered solely on events, although I understand why that's important to the Gaslamp Quarter. We recognize that many of these reopenings are not possible while our schools are closed. And the priorities that has been placed not on really focusing on that and understanding how those workers who would like to go back to work are unable to do it because they don't have a reasonable, safe, and a reliable option for their children during the day is something that the next mayor also has to be focused on. And a part of my effort with my Back to Work SD plan, which has been published on my website, I encourage you all to take a look at it, really recognizes that our economy cannot reopen until our schools are reopened. And it has to be done in a safe fashion. Our children are obviously those who we have to prioritize and protect. But I want to recognize that it's not just about special events or other key parts of our economy that continue to be closed, which will hamper our ability to do things like special events, like reopening businesses further. And of course, that is our education system.
Got it. Ready for the next question. This is Todd, you start with this one. In recent years, the city has failed to provide the Gaslamp Quarter with basic services such as painting curbs, general maintenance, and police services. Considering the impending tax revenue shortfall the city faces after COVID-19 and the recession, how will you as mayor ensure that the city provides these basic and critical services to the Gaslamp Quarter?
Well, this is an area where I feel as though my past experience is instructive and hopefully would allow you to understand that I'm capable of doing this. I was chair of the city's budget committee for 6 years. When I joined the city council in 2008, we were in the throes of the Great Recession, facing massive budget deficits. Working with my colleagues, the mayor, the community, our employee groups, we were able to get the city out of a deficit position back to surpluses with healthy reserves. Now, that was not without significant sacrifice by our employees and by neighborhood service levels. But the point is that we were able to figure out a way forward together, such that when I turned over the reins of the budget committee to Councilmember Bry, she was looking at a surplus and the ability to actually make strategic enhancements across the city. Now, sadly, the city's budget was in deficit before the recession, before the pandemic and the recession. And of course, both of those things have only made the problem worse. It is very obvious to me the next mayor is going to be facing a significant mid-year budget deficit because this mayor and council did not properly balance the budget. And so as a consequence, this is a very real question. My commitment to you all is to operate in a transparent and open fashion, just as I did when I was the chair of the budget committee, to understand and prioritize those services that must be kept at all costs, the areas where we can economize in the short term when we're facing significant downfalls, and to move forward with a realistic plan that gets the economy going again. This is what we've done previously. This is what I can do again. And again, this has to be done in concert with the Gaslamp Quarter in downtown, obviously the downtown partnership that went through the PBID provides some of these additional services that I think are going to be critical for making sure that people feel safe in coming to downtown, that feel safe to go into businesses in the Gaslamp Quarter, and can get us through this difficult time. I don't want to make many bones about it. It's going to be really tough, everybody. But I believe as mayor, I owe you to tell you the truth. And the truth of the matter is that we can get through this. We've done it before. We can do it again.
Barbara?
Yes, I hear this frustration all over the city, not just downtown, that the city is not providing core services, code enforcement against things like short-term rentals, against scooters, against illegal dumping. It varies neighborhood by neighborhood, but the theme is uniform. And that's why I'm running for mayor. As a council member, I do not control the bureaucracy. If you call up and you say you want a pothole filled, I say please to the bureaucracy to get it done. But as mayor, I can lead cultural change at City Hall so that the organization of the city is focused on the needs of our neighborhoods and the needs of our residents. Listen, I've signed the front of the paycheck. I've dealt with budgets my whole life. The city has a bloated middle management. We have leases like 101 Ash Street that we don't need. There is money that we can reallocate to spend on our neighborhoods. And I believe that city employees really care about stepping up and providing these services if they have the right leadership. They want to succeed. They care about doing their jobs. And it's these basic issues that determine our quality of life. And as mayor, this will be my focus.
Great. Next question is about homelessness, and it's a complicated one. How will you empower the San Diego Police Department to enforce the removal of people who are loitering, using drugs, defecating, or causing an unsafe and unsanitary environment in the Gaslamp Quarter?
So clearly the homeless people we're seeing on the street right now are the chronic homeless, people who have serious issues, probably mental health and substance abuse issues. These people need to be in a structured program. Most of the homeless individuals during the pandemic have been offered a place at the convention center, and some have turned it down, and those are the individuals you are seeing. I will enable the police to enforce the law and to get these people the help that they so desperately need. My homeless plan does focus on addressing the root causes, and a seamless system. Right now, we do not have a seamless system, and I will give you an example. On March 3rd, Election Day, I was in the southern part of the city. I was crossing the street at a busy intersection, and a gentleman walked up to me and said, "I'm homeless, I need help." I called 211 San Diego expecting to be able to find a shelter bed for him. And instead, I was put on hold and transferred from place to place and given a list of phone numbers to call. This gentleman did not have a cell phone. I called my council office and we got him into the Alpha Project. But I'm a council member. I'm really homeless and I'm on the street. There should be one number I can call, somewhere I can access easily to get the help that I need. And he shared his story. His sister had dropped him off a mile away. She couldn't handle him anymore. He had lost his job. His wife had left him. He was drinking too much. He wanted help. He wanted to turn his life around. And it wasn't going to be easy. He knew that. But why wasn't there a simple place he could call to get the help that he so desperately wanted? As mayor, I'm going to fix that.
Todd?
So I think it's important to understand that solving homelessness and joining the ranks of cities across the nation that have successfully ended chronic homelessness is not going to be done through criminalization. Criminalizing the homeless is simply a way of keeping people in poverty by incarcerating them, keeping them loaded with fines and fees and other stuff that really prevents them from being able to break the cycle that they are in. And we are currently in a national atmosphere where we're reimagining what law enforcement looks like in the 21st century. I would point out that if we can successfully transition the kinds of responsibilities we've given to law enforcement that both they and the community seemingly are not comfortable with, specifically being mental health clinicians, being homeless outreach workers, being truancy officers, and give those to trained professionals who can do that often at lower cost. It is my hope that we'll have additional resources to prioritize the kinds of calls that many of the business owners and residents in the Gaslamp Quarter and in many communities across the city call for service about, but which never gets prioritized because, again, the officers that we task this with are overwhelmed. I think it's important that we have a comprehensive system for moving folks off the streets. I support a housing first approach that is a national best practice that is important for addressing people where they are at, getting them suitably housed and keeping them housed. And by doing so, I think we can reduce the head count on the streets and instead, again, focus on those individuals that are the drivers of the largest number of calls. Working with the city attorney's office, we've had the SMART program where we can focus on the people who are consuming the most amount of public resources and get them off the streets, again, with an eye to try and reduce the spend at the city and actually help more people. That approach is how we can get to where we want to be as a community. But importantly, again, it's not about criminalizing the homeless, but it is about enforcing our laws. And you would note, David, the things that you said are illegal, but we can't enforce on them because we've overwhelmed our police department with so many other demands they often are not trained for, do not want to perform. And we have the ability right now, because of a national dialogue, to transition those to folks who are capable of doing it, freeing them up to be able to respond to these calls that so many of you make every day, but go unresponded to.
Got it. Let's move on to the next question. Todd, you go first on this one. It's basically, what are your opinions about two propositions on the November ballot? Proposition 15, which relates to commercial property taxes, and Proposition 21, which relates to rent control.
So Prop 15 is also known as split roll, which would remove commercial properties from Prop 13 protections. I support Prop 13 protections for residential properties. In this regard, I see the need for additional revenue, particularly for our schools in this context of trying to reopen. But I am very concerned about the impact of Prop 15 on small businesses, particularly because the exemption is for properties with $3 million or less. For many of your businesses, the folks who are on this Zoom, you would be impacted. And it's for that reason that I cannot offer an endorsement in the Prop 15 election. On Prop 21, I have long opposed rent control. I oppose Prop 21 and would encourage a no vote. Last year in the legislature, we passed a bill, AB 1482, which institutes an anti-rent gouging law in California. And it's intended to have a statewide scope of addressing excessive rent increases that we see across California. I see it as superior to rent control in the sense that it is applicable across the state. It does not disincentivize the construction of new housing in our state. It resets with the transition between tenants so that property owners can get their market value, but it does provide protection to long-term renters. It also has a sunset date, and it's intended to force cities across the state as well as the legislature to address the supply issue, which is a main driver of our housing affordability crisis. It is for that reason, particularly because this bill has only been in effect for a few months now, that I believe that is a reasonable protection that people can support, and why I do not believe folks should vote yes on Prop 21.
Barbara?
I'm voting no on both Proposition 15 and Proposition 21. My opponent stated many of the reasons that I'm voting no on Proposition 15. Most leases are written that any increase in expenses is simply passed on to the business. So if you're renting space in the Gaslamp and Proposition 15 passes and the building is reassessed, your rent is going to go up. And that is something that will be devastating to small business, particularly during a pandemic. And it's very interesting that organizations like the NAACP California and other organizations that represent businesses in minority communities are also opposing Proposition 15. I'm also voting no on Proposition 21 because rent control simply doesn't work. My opponent would say that the bill he voted on in Sacramento is rent stabilization. I would call it rent control, to be very clear. And there are other ways we should be addressing our housing issues. I have a very detailed plan as part of my roadmap to recovery. And with the pandemic, we are going to have good opportunities to reuse office and commercial spaces as housing, which is much less expensive than building new housing. And I'm going to be continuing to support updating community plans along transit and to revamp our development services department so that we can get new housing units built more quickly.
All right, I'm going to do a rebuttal from the audience. Todd, someone in the audience in the chat suggested they were confused by your response on Prop 15. You said you couldn't endorse it, but they weren't sure. Are you for, against, or on the fence on Prop 15?
I'm not making an endorsement in the race.
Does that mean you're against it, or am I re-asking the same question too many times?
You're asking for, you're asking for positions that I've taken. So I've endorsed, say, Measure A. I've endorsed Measure B.
Okay.
I'm not offering an endorsement in Proposition 15.
Okay. Question, this is the final question, and I believe Barbara goes first, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I got confused there. Since the federal and state governments did not finalize a COVID-19 relief bill before adjourning for the year, landlords will have free rein to evict tenants. How will you protect tenants from landlords attempting to terminate leases?
So first of all, I believe most landlords don't want to evict tenants. They're going to be stuck with an empty space. And as I've been talking to property owners all over the city, they are attempting to negotiate payment terms. But I think what's most important is we have to allow you to get your businesses to, stay open, to make sure you have certainty about what the rules of the road are, and so that you can generate the revenue that you need to pay the rent. That's the most important thing we can do as elected officials. And as mayor, I'm going to work very closely with the county, who is our health department, to make sure that the rules are clear, that we don't keep moving the goalposts, that you understand what you need to do to stay open. During the early days of the pandemic, small business was really disproportionately hurt. You could go to Target or Costco to buy a toy or a piece of furniture or clothing, but you couldn't go to your local neighborhood retailer to buy the same things, when you could easily have gone there wearing a face mask and being socially distanced. I want to make sure that whatever we do going forward is done with data in mind, and that we do not penalize businesses needlessly. And that is how I have, I'm a businesswoman. Data is very, very important to me. And I feel that sometimes during the pandemic, decisions were made without regard to data.
Todd?
So I think the question was about evictions, particularly for commercial tenants. And I have supported the city's efforts at an eviction moratorium that has been extended multiple times, unfortunately not with the support of my opponent. I've also supported legislation at the state level, AB 3088, authored by my colleague David Chu, that extends eviction protections through February of 2021. I think these are modest efforts that are intended to do, I think, what the questioner is asking, which is to understand the circumstances that many tenants, commercial and residential, are facing, which is that they have curtailed their operations. They don't have the revenue they once had. And we're at a time when we're asking people to stay home in order to protect their health and the health of the community. It makes no sense to throw people out on the streets. I recognize that's not without impact on mortgage holders. And that's why I've supported legislation in Sacramento to provide pauses on mortgages for those who are impacted also by the pandemic. Sadly, that legislation was undermined by the financial services industry, but I did still support it because I recognize that mortgage holders also need relief. David, ultimately, what this requires is national action. This is not a unique to San Diego or California issue. This is a national issue. And the inability for Washington to come around an additional relief bill, a relief bill that would help tenants, that would help school districts, would help cities and counties and states to actually weather this pandemic, is something that Republicans and Democrats claim that they both support, and yet nothing is getting done. As your mayor, I would use the bully pulpit of my office to make sure that those in Washington and in Sacramento know full well that San Diegans need this relief, and that they have to put the partisan bickering aside in order to actually do what they claim they want to do, which is to help Americans get through this particular pandemic. So continued support for the local moratorium, support for state interventions as well for those who are COVID impacted, and additional advocacy at the federal level is what we must do in order to try and keep people in their properties during the course of the pandemic.
Michael, we're a little ahead of schedule. Should I add another question, or do you want to? Yeah, we've had the multiple people in the chat ask about AB 5 and the related Prop 22 because they're connected. So I'd love to get your folks' opinions on that. I could argue that affects the Gaslamp because a lot of people get there with Uber and Lyft. So I believe it's your turn to go first, Todd.
Sure. Well, what's the question?
What is your stance on AB 5, and what is your stance on Prop 22, and sort of the general issue that those two things affect?
So I voted for AB 5. I do not support Prop 22. Here's the situation. Increasingly, what we are seeing is the misclassification of workers. Recent Supreme Court decision sort of imagined how we define employees in California. That was to some chagrin of some employers and some workers. And so we passed AB 5, which was legislation to trim some of that scope of that decision. We actually passed a bill last month that further adjusts the provisions of AB 5 to exempt additional workers and provide a strengthening to the business-to-business exemption that is in AB 5. Ultimately, David, I believe that workers are entitled to minimum wages, to healthcare insurance, to paid sick days, to unemployment insurance, and to Social Security. That is because of the increasing misclassification of workers, more and more Californians don't have access to that. And that was a part of what was attempted to be addressed by the Dynamex decision by our Supreme Court on a unanimous ruling and by AB 5 and subsequent follow-on legislation. I think it's important. Obviously, in the pandemic, we have come to understand the extreme importance of unemployment insurance, of access to paid sick days. And I think that workers should have that ability. And the fact of the matter is when workers are not provided that is benefits, that is money that flows into the pockets of the corporations that employ them, not to the benefit of the broader society. I would point out that we are currently, as a state, borrowing billions from the federal government to keep our unemployment system solvent, in part because employers are not paying into the unemployment system as they once did. Prop 22 is up to the voters. They will render their decision. And of course, if it passes, we will deal with that. But ultimately, I think we should all be concerned about what happens in a society where fewer and fewer people have access to the social safety net that catches people when the chips are down. And I would argue right now the chips are down, and therefore we shouldn't be supporting additional erosions to basic worker protections, things like unemployment insurance and Social Security.
Barbara?
I have called for the repeal of AB 5. I think it was the wrong approach to dealing with the Dynamex court decision. Yes, workers need access to protections and benefits. But what England has done is create a third category of worker, acknowledging that we live in a new world. We live in the gig economy world where many people want flexibility and want the ability to do many different things. And this third category of worker gets benefits and protections on a sliding scale depending on the number of hours a week that they work. And they also get a minimum guaranteed payment above the minimum wage. And that is what Proposition 22 will do for Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash drivers. And I will be voting yes on it. It's a step forward in acknowledging that we live in a new world. And what I have seen because of AB 5, I've talked to many San Diegans who are simply out of work, that the jobs they used to do are now being given to people who live in other states. So it is a job killer. It has disproportionately hurt small businesses. It has disproportionately hurt businesses owned by people of color. AB 5 was an antiquated approach by creating exemptions, starting with doctors, lawyers, real estate agents, industries, professions that have well-paid lobbyists. But we live in a new world. And every day we're going to be creating a new category of worker because the world keeps evolving around us. So that's why we should have had a completely different approach of creating a third category of worker.
Great. And we have time for closing statements from each of you. I guess Barbara, go first.
Last.
I guess when the opening it went, so Todd, you're going to go first on closing. Is that okay with you, Todd? Great.
I'm flexible.
2 minutes for a closing statement, Todd.
David, thank you for moderating. It is always a thankless task, but you did it well. Thank you very much. And thank you, Michael, and the Gaslamp Quarter Association for this opportunity. And again, for all of you for tuning in. You care deeply about this city, and I appreciate your interest in the future of it. As you heard me say, it is time for us to quit acting like a small town and instead start acting like the 8th largest city in the country that we are. If we do that, we can dispense with the issues that have been on the civic table for so long but never seem to get addressed and start truly addressing the issues that need addressing in this city. The sorry state of our infrastructure, the increasing number of homeless in our community in our streets, and of course our housing affordability crisis. I mentioned before that I'm the son of a maid and a gardener. They are two people who worked hard in San Diego, were able to buy a home in this city, raise their 2 children, put us both through college, the first in our family to go. And I would say that story was doable 30 years ago. I'd ask all of you watching right now, do you believe that someone of similar background could accomplish those same things today in San Diego? I think that we all truthfully know that it is nearly impossible. And I can't accept that. I've spent my career fighting for folks to make sure that this city works for everybody. You saw me lead the fight to raise the city's minimum wage and provide paid sick days. You saw me fight for a transportation system that is more equitable and gives people choices when it comes from getting from A to B. I helped pass our landmark climate action plan on a unanimous bipartisan vote of the city council at a time when it seems that we can't get the two parties to agree on whether or not climate change is real. Here in San Diego, I put together a vote that says, yes, we know it's real and we will take action on it. As your mayor, I will help lead the city to defeat COVID-19, to get our economy back on track, to make sure we address structural racism in our community. But again, importantly, making sure I never take my eye off the ball when it comes to housing and infrastructure. I have lived my entire life serving my hometown. Others like to criticize me for that, but the fact of the matter is I am proud to have spent my entire career serving my community. And I want the honor of being able to do that work for the next number of years as your mayor. I will remind you all that I served in the mayor's office a number of years ago during a different kind of crisis. I led our city for 8 months. I'm asking you for the opportunity to do it for 8 years. So I humbly ask for your vote on November the 3rd or sooner. I encourage you to vote early and to either mail or drop off your ballot. But importantly, let's vote for a new direction in San Diego. Let's vote for a direction for a city that has big dreams and bold visions and actually creates space for you and for your family. That's our goal, that's our vision. And thank you so much for listening this morning.
Barbara?
First of all, thank you all for spending part of your morning with us to talk about the future of our city. Listen, I'm the outsider in this race. Nobody expected me to get out of the primary. It's a very different race for San Diego. It's a nonpartisan office. Mayor is a nonpartisan office, but for the first time ever, 2 Democrats are in the final 2. And it was expected that my opponent, who did get the endorsement of the Central Committee of the Democratic Party, would get to the final 2 along with a Republican. At the beginning of the race, we didn't know who it would be, but one did run and was well funded. But yet I made it out of the primary. And the special interests have lined up behind my opponent. They lined up early, expecting that he was going to be inevitable. But if you saw a recent poll by Survey USA for the San Diego Union Tribune a few weeks ago, it showed that I actually have a slight lead with a large number of voters still making up their minds. I've spent my life as the underdog my whole life. I graduated from Harvard Business School in 1976. At a time, few women were getting an MBA anywhere. Most of my early career, I was either the only woman in the room or one of a few women. My first marriage ended in 1993. I was a single mom with 2 daughters, 8 and 11. I was working at the Connect program at UCSD, helping start high-tech and biotech companies. But it was clear I needed to figure out how to earn more money to support my family. And that's when I became an entrepreneur and was on the founding team of several local companies. I've spent my life standing up for others, challenging the status quo, and getting things done. My life has been about coming up with solutions, not making empty promises. And that's what my roadmap to recovery is about. Universal internet access, creative reuse of office buildings into housing, make San Diego a model for an effective remote workforce, promote job development, tech and biotech downtown. That's going to help the Gaslamp a lot. And reinvent downtown as an employment, arts, and entertainment hub. We have 5 theaters downtown. We have music clubs downtown, but yet we don't view it in a cohesive way as an arts and entertainment hub. And of course, we need to clean up City Hall, change the culture, make it accountable, transparent, and provide customer service while we focus on providing our neighborhoods, including the Gaslamp, with core services. Listen, I have had a diverse life. I've been a journalist, a small business owner, and a leader in the tech world. My priority as mayor will be to rebuild our economy. COVID-19 has exemplified existing inequities that we need to address. And that's why my private sector experience is very important. And it's why my office as mayor will include a school engagement coordinator who will work with schools starting south of 8 so that growing up, young people understand the job opportunities available to them. And as they get older, they will have access to paid internships. Clearly, this city can't continue operating the way it has. That's why my background as an entrepreneur is important. As an entrepreneur, you get told no over and over again, and you learn that no is only a way station to yes. And of course, with my background, I'm going to review all the city leases and make sure we have no more deals like 101 Ash Street. I've learned something from every part of my life. And I believe that the diversity of my experience has qualified me to be your next mayor. I'm excited about our future. We have so many opportunities, a diverse population, thriving tech and biotech, proximity to the border, a beautiful natural environment, unique neighborhoods, and the potential to make downtown a tech and biotech center. With the right mayor, we can capitalize on all these opportunities. I know that working together, we can make San Diego work for you. I would be honored to have your vote.
Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Todd. Thanks to everyone who attended the forum.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. We'll have a recap posted on gaslamp.org later in the day. Thanks again, everybody.